Yet, the Jewish tribes of that time seemed not to grasp the full picture. They failed to find or identify the newborn prophet. Perhaps it was never part of the divine plan for them to do so, for the chosen one, Muhammad, was not born of their lineage, but from the descendants of Ishmael. This, too, was part of a greater design, crafted with divine wisdom by the Almighty Himself, who knows all. In pre-Islamic Arabia, it was customary for families to send their infants to the countryside, entrusting them to wet nurses who could raise them in cleaner air and a healthier environment. For the infant Muhammad, destiny had chosen a very special woman, Halima Saadia. From the moment she took him in her arms, her life transformed. Where once there was drought and hunger, now came abundance. Her previously dry breast flowed with milk. Her animals, once weak and lean, now grazed on lush green pastures. Prosperity returned to her household. Witnessing this sudden change, Halima and her husband, Harith, stood in awe. A blessed child has been given to us, he remarked. As the years passed, Muhammad grew strong under Halima's care. But the joy was short-lived. Not long after being returned to his mother Amina, tragedy struck again. She fell ill and passed away. Muhammad, still a child, was now orphaned. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, took him in with deep love and care. Though most in Mecca were idol worshippers, Abdul Muttalib quietly held faith in the one God, his heart clinging to monotheism, hidden from a society lost in ignorance. But the wheel of time turned once more. As Abdul Muttalib neared death, he entrusted Muhammad to his son, Abu Talib, instructing him to raise the boy as his own. Abu Talib fulfilled this promise with unwavering devotion. Muhammad grew up in a household filled with compassion and guardianship. Through each turn of fate, the hand of destiny gently but firmly guided the boy who would soon become the seal of the prophets. Even in childhood, signs of the extraordinary followed Muhammad. Between the ages of 9 and 12, he accompanied Abu Talib on a caravan journey to Syria. There, near the town of Bosra, they passed by the monastery of a Christian monk named Bahira. A scholar of sacred texts, Bahira had long studied the scriptures and believed the arrival of the final prophet was near. But he had never imagined he might live to meet him. From his window, Bahira observed something strange. A single cloud hovered over the caravan, shielding it from the sun. Intrigued by this sign, he invited the travelers to a meal. As they gathered, Bahira scanned their faces, looking for the one described in his books. But he saw no sign, until he asked, "Is this everyone?" The answer came, "Only a young boy remains behind, watching the camels." When Muhammad was brought forth, Bahira's heart stirred. The moment he laid eyes on the boy, he felt certain this was the one. He observed closely and found every prophetic sign from the scriptures matched this child. As a Christian scholar, Bahira knew well that both Moses and Jesus had foretold the coming of a final messenger. The story of Moses is a tale of divine protection and defiance against tyranny. Born in Egypt under Pharaoh's brutal reign, Moses came into the world at a time when a dream haunted the tyrant, a vision that a child from among the Israelites would rise to challenge his power. In fear, Pharaoh decreed that all Israelite newborn boys be killed. But divine plans defy human fear. Moses' mother, driven by courage and trust in God, placed her infant in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile. The river carried him to the palace of Pharaoh himself, where the queen found the child and, moved by compassion, chose to raise him as her own. Thus, the boy destined to confront Pharaoh was raised in his very house. Surrounded by luxury, Moses never forgot his roots. He watched his people suffer and felt their pain. Then, the time came, God chose him as a prophet and sent him to deliver the Israelites from bondage. By then, Pharaoh's son had ascended to the throne, continuing the legacy of oppression. Moses stood before him, proclaiming the message of the one God, demanding freedom for his people. Pharaoh refused. Even after witnessing miracle after miracle, he remained hardened. Then divine wrath unfolded. Plague after plague struck Egypt. The Nile turned to blood. Fish died. Water became undrinkable. And still, Pharaoh clung to arrogance. One calamity followed another. Frogs overran the land. Lice swarmed the people. Swarms of locusts devoured crops. Darkness engulfed Egypt. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remained sealed. Each plague was a divine warning, but he refused to relent. His pride eclipsed the truth he had seen with his own eyes. Then came the final blow, the death of the firstborns. That night, grief and wailing filled every Egyptian household. Only then did Pharaoh, broken and overwhelmed, finally permit Moses and the Israelites to leave. But even in retreat, Pharaoh's arrogance returned. He rallied his army and pursued Moses and his people to the shores of the Red Sea. Trapped between the sea and the approaching army, the Israelites trembled in fear. But Moses, calm and resolute, turned to the sky. By the command of the Almighty, he struck the sea with his staff. The waters parted, towering like walls, and a path opened across the seabed. The Israelites crossed in awe. As Pharaoh's army followed, the waters crashed down upon them, drowning the soldiers and silencing their tyranny forever. This was not just a tale of liberation, it was a divine declaration. God is greater than kings, empires, and armies. These stories were known to men like Bahira. They had studied the scrolls, traced the lineage of prophecy, and knew that another messenger would come, one who would bring the final, universal message. And now, Bahira stood face to face with the boy who bore every sign foretold in the scriptures. He warned Abu Talib, "Take him back to your land. Guard him well. The people of the book may recognize him and seek to harm him before his time." Abu Talib heeded the warning and returned swiftly to Mecca. The boy Muhammad continued to grow, quiet, thoughtful, just. Even as a youth, he never bowed to idols, never indulged in the corrupt customs of his people. He was known for his truthfulness, earning the title Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Every chapter of Muhammad's early early life, every guardian who raised him, every trial he endured was part of a divine orchestration. The final prophet was being prepared, shielded, nurtured, guided, until the moment would come when he would receive the first revelation, a moment that would shift the axis of history forever. He would often retreat from the noise of Mecca to seek solitude and silence. His heart was troubled by the injustice, idolatry, and moral decay that surrounded him. In the stillness of the desert and the quiet of the mountains, he sought answers. His place of solace became the cave of Hira, a humble shelter nestled in the rugged heights of Jabal al-Nur, the mountain of light. There, amidst the darkness of the cave and the starlit sky, Muhammad would reflect deeply on the nature of existence, on the Creator, and on the fate of his people. Days turned into nights and nights into days, and he fasted, prayed, and waited, not knowing that he was on the brink of a moment that would ignite the dawn of a new era. And then, one night, in the sacred month of Ramadan, it happened. As he sat alone in meditation, a powerful presence filled the cave. The angel Gabriel, appeared before him in a radiant form that shook the very fabric of reality. With a voice that echoed across time, the angel spoke a single command: Iqra, read. Muhammad, startled and unlettered, replied, I am not of those who read. But the angel embraced him tightly and repeated, Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. These were the first verses of the Quran, the divine words that would continue to descend over 23 years, reshaping the hearts of men and the course of history. Muhammad rushed down the mountain, trembling, unsure of what he had just experienced. He sought comfort in the arms of Khadija, his loyal wife. She held him, listened to his words, and believed in him with unwavering faith. Without hesitation, she took him to her cousin Warqa ibn Nawfal, a Christian scholar well versed in the scriptures of old. After hearing the account, Warqa's eyes welled with tears. He confirmed, This is the same angel who came to Moses. You are the prophet of this nation. If only I were young again, I would stand by you when your people turn against you. The journey of prophethood had begun. From the lonely silence of a mountain cave, a message had emerged, a message destined to echo across the earth, calling mankind back to the oneness of God, to justice, to compassion, to light. The cave was left behind, but its echoes lingered within the heart of Muhammad. The weight of revelation, both divine and immense, had now become his lifelong mission. In the stillness of his soul, he knew that this message, the final guidance from the Almighty, was not meant to be kept in silence. But he also knew the danger. Mecca, proud and steeped in tribal traditions, was not ready for a call that would shatter its idols and confront its power structures. So, the prophet began quietly, inviting only those closest to him. The first to believe was the very woman who had stood by him always, Khadija bint Khuwailid. With unwavering faith, she became not only the first Muslim, but the first pillar of Islam's foundation. Then came a young boy, just 10 years old, growing up under the prophet's roof, Ali ibn Abi Talib, his cousin. Without hesitation, Ali accepted the truth. His heart, pure and untainted, resonated with the oneness of God and the sincerity of the message. Next came the prophet's loyal friend and companion, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, a man known for his truthfulness, wisdom, and generosity. Upon hearing the prophet's words, he believed at once. And with him came a wave of new believers. His influence brought in names that would one day be carved into the history of Islam: Uthman ibn Affan, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Abdurrahman ibn Awf, Talha ibn Ubaidullah, men who would become leaders, warriors, and protectors of the faith. Then came Zayd ibn Haritha, once a servant in Muhammad's home but loved like a son. He, too, embraced the message without question. In secret, they prayed. In quiet gatherings, they learned. The house of Al-Arqam, a discreet location near the hill of Safa, became the first school of Islam where hearts were shaped and the words of the Quran were recited like soft flames in the dark. But a message like this could not stay hidden forever. After 3 years of secrecy, the command from Allah came: proclaim what you are commanded and turn away from the polytheists. Quran 15:94. And so, the Prophet climbed the hill of Safa and called the people of Mecca to gather. His voice, strong and clear, pierced the air. If I told you that an army was approaching behind this hill, would you believe me? They replied, We have never known you to lie. He said, Then know that I am a warner to you before a severe punishment. I call you to worship none but Allah. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Then came the voice of his own uncle, Abu Lahab, full of scorn and mockery. May you perish for this. Is this why you gathered us? And from that moment, the hostility began. The offer from the leaders of Quraysh was not one of peace. It was a desperate bargain, a shallow attempt to preserve their power and culture. Worship our gods for a year, they said, and we will worship yours for a year in return. But to compromise on truth is to betray its essence. And so, the Almighty responded, not with negotiation, but with a revelation that echoed through eternity. Say, O disbelievers, I do not worship what you worship, nor do you worship what I worship. To you your religion, and to me mine. Surah Al-Kafirun. This was a declaration of spiritual independence, clear, uncompromising, and powerful. The idolaters were infuriated. Their patience had worn thin. and their oppression grew crueler by the day. Those without tribal protection were tortured, starved, and even killed for uttering the words, La ilaha illa Allah. Bilal ibn Rabah, a former slave, became one of the first to suffer brutal torment. Stripped under the scorching sun, his tormentors placed heavy stones upon his chest. Yet with each breath, he cried out, Ahad, Ahad, one God, one God. Sumayya bint Khayyat, the first woman martyr in Islam, stood firm in her faith until she was speared by Abu Jahl himself. Her blood became the ink of sacrifice in the early story of Islam. The Prophet, despite the persecution, continued to call his people with gentleness, wisdom, and truth. By his side stood Khadija, his beloved wife, and Abu Talib, his uncle and protector, though he had not embraced Islam. Their presence shielded him from assassination, but this protection would not last forever. The Quraysh tried to tempt, bribe, and threaten him. They offered him riches, women, kingship, everything a man could desire. But the Prophet's heart belonged to something far greater. He replied with words that would be remembered for centuries. By Allah, if they place the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand to abandon this mission, I would not abandon it until Allah causes it to prevail or I perish. It was the 10th year of the prophethood. That year, two of the Prophet's greatest supporters left this world. First his beloved wife Khadija, then his uncle and protector Abu Talib. Their deaths struck at the core of his soul, leaving him both vulnerable and grief-stricken. This year would later be remembered in history as Aam al-Huzn, the year of sorrow. With no one to shield him from Quraysh hostility, the streets of Mecca turned harsher. Stones were thrown, insults hurled, but Muhammad remained steadfast. Yet, as the doors of Mecca closed, the Prophet looked outward to a town nestled between the mountains, Taif. He traveled there with hope. Perhaps its people would listen. Perhaps hearts elsewhere were still open to truth. But instead of welcome, he was met with rejection. The leaders of Taif mocked him, ridiculed his message, and incited the street boys to chase him out of the city. Stones rained down, blood trickled from his feet. Weakened and wounded, the Prophet took refuge in a garden. He raised his face to the heavens, and with trembling lips, he made one of the most moving prayers in human history. O Allah, to you I complain of my weakness, my helplessness, and my humiliation before the people. You are the most merciful of those who show mercy. If you are not angry with me, I do not care. But your protection is easier for me. The skies remained silent until a miracle came. One night, while resting near the Kaaba, the angel Gabriel appeared again. This time, not with words, but with a journey. A heavenly creature, Al-Buraq, swifter than lightning, carried the Prophet from Mecca to Jerusalem to the noble sanctuary of Al-Aqsa. There, he led the spirits of all previous prophets in prayer, Moses, Jesus, Abraham, Noah, all behind Muhammad, the final messenger. Then began the ascension, Miraj, through the heavens. He ascended past the skies of this world, through the levels of paradise, until he stood closer to the throne of God than any created being had ever been. There, he was given a gift, not gold, not armies, but a commandment, Salah, the 5 daily prayers, a link between heaven and earth, a daily reminder of divine connection. The Prophet returned before dawn, a journey across dimensions in a single night. But the next morning, the Quraysh laughed when he spoke of it. A journey to Jerusalem and the heavens in one night? Impossible. But Abu Bakr, his closest companion, without hesitation said, if he said it, then it is the truth. From that moment on, he was called as Siddiq, the truthful affirmer. 13 years had passed since the first revelation. Persecution had reached its peak. The Prophet's followers were tortured, mocked, and driven from their homes. Yet, their resolve remained unshaken. Then came a glimmer of hope from a distant oasis city, Yathrib. There, the message of Islam had begun to take root. Two tribes, Aus and Khajraj, invited the Prophet to settle disputes and lead them as a unifier and guide. They pledged loyalty under a tree at Kaaba, promising to protect him as they would their own. This would become Medina, the city of the Prophet. Furious at his growing influence, Quraysh leaders hatched a plot to kill Muhammad. They chose a young man from each tribe to strike together, so blame would be shared and vengeance avoided. But God's plan was greater. Sleep in my bed, wrap yourself in my cloak. They won't harm you. As the assassins surrounded the house, Muhammad slipped away, unseen, under the cover of night. A handful of dust in his hand. He recited verses of protection and cast it toward them, and they saw nothing. Thus began the most significant journey in Islamic history, the Hijrah. Inside the cave, Abu Bakr grew anxious. If they look down, they will see us. The Prophet calmly replied, do not be afraid, for God is with us. Surah 9:40. Outside, the pursuers stood mere feet away, but they turned back, fooled by a spider's web and a nesting dove at the entrance. A miracle, protection sent from above. After days of hardship, they arrived in Yathrib. The city erupted in joy. Children sang, women threw flowers, and men rushed to greet the one who brought light into their world. Talai al-Badru alaina. The full moon has risen upon us. This migration was not just an escape, it was the birth of a new civilization, a land where faith would flourish, where the oppressed would find justice, and where the Prophet would lay the foundation for the first Islamic state. With his own hands, he helped build the mosque, a house of prayer, education, and unity. Here, he delivered sermons, solved disputes, and met with tribes. Here, the call to prayer echoed for the first time across Medina. A new chapter had begun.